Hello and welcome to Cielo Costa's video series on digital transformation in the built environment. We talk to industry leaders and experts about some of the unique challenges in the sector, from legacy digital and physical infrastructure to complex regulatory requirements to the many AI, software and PropTech solutions that are on offer. If you work in the built environment and are looking for some pointers and the perspective of your peers, this might be for you. Hope you enjoy. Thank you. Well, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Hi, everyone. With me today, we've got Floris Nijenhuis, who's the founder of Stairpay, a PropTech startup. We're going to talk about the journey that Floris has been on over the last 3 years since he founded the business and some of the challenges and opportunities he's seen for the company and in the market as a whole. Before we get into the detail of that, Floris, it'd be great if you could just briefly introduce yourself, tell us a bit about you, your role, and how you came to set up Stairpay.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Ollie. So background on me, Dutch Italian. I started my career in investment banking at Barclays, spent about 3 years doing that. I left just before the money got too good to leave, and I joined an early stage startup called Talent Desk. I was the first employee there, so it was just me and CTO. It wasn't much more than just an idea, and within about 2 years, we took that to be fully fledged product with some FTSE 250 customers, decent amount of revenue, team about 15. So I took that journey from 0 to 1 for the first time, which was really exciting. Then tried to do it again at another startup called Tab. I joined Tab in March 2020, and it was a travel startup. So not the best career move I've ever made.
That's unfortunate. Yeah.
I know. But we kind of went on that journey again, and by the time I left, we actually got to break even, which they were just before I joined, but the revenue dipped about 90%, obviously because of travel. Yeah. So I kind of got it. I joined as head of growth when it was profitable. Within about a week, it went to 90% down, and then by the time I left, they were profitable again. So I'm not going to take the credit. But anyway, I did that journey from 0 to 1 twice, and I thought I'd use my third time lucky for my own startup, which is how I came to set up Stairpay.
Brilliant. Cool. Thanks for that background. And then I guess what was the thinking behind setting Stairpay up in terms of your sort of market research and your thinking that there was a product market fit, if you like, for Stairpay as an offering?
So, well, first of all, I always knew I wanted to go do my own business, but I always said that I'd only do it on something where I actually really believed in the problem. And if there's a big enough problem, you're probably going to land with something which is a big enough business to, employ a few employees and have a good career. Not necessarily go and build a unicorn or whatever, even though obviously that would be great. But the problem of trying to get first-time buyers onto the property ladder seems so big and so unsolved that that's what I wanted to try and do. And we're now, 3 years in 2 weeks. And it's been a long journey. I think in terms of finding product market fit, I would only really say we found product market fit about 2 months ago. Even though, strangely, we've removed features rather than build more features. So we've got the exact same platform that we had. Well, obviously there's some improvements, but we've got pretty much the same platform that we had 12 months ago. But our business model was wrong. Our pricing was wrong. The way we targeted our customers was wrong. And as soon as all those things came together, it was really frustrating because we built the tech right the first time, which is normally the issue. We were just selling it wrong. Yeah,
interesting. So it sounds like you learned quite a lot because it's been 3 years in terms of how to make the business more viable and more relevant and more commercial. Yeah. I mean, it would be good to talk a bit about almost what your perceptions were 3 years ago and then how they developed and the things you think you got wrong, or was it just a natural progression rather than necessarily getting it wrong to start with? If you could talk through that journey, it'd be really interesting.
That's actually a good way to think about it because I don't think we necessarily did some things wrong. Because to take you through the journey, so April 2022 is when I started the business. It was basically just me in a coffee shop until about September. Then in September, I hired a couple of friends with my own savings. And in all this time, I didn't have a salary. But I started paying some developers with my own savings to build an MVP that we could go and raise some money off. We did that in December 22. And then in November, the mini budget Liz Truss basically ruined the economy, and that meant that we couldn't get our money from our fundraiser until August 2023. So that delayed everything massively. All of that time period for me was research and try and build a basic MVP that we could try and go to market with. So we launched that in August 23, August 24, and immediately we said this is a SaaS solution. So people are going to pay us X amount a month based on the number of properties that they have. And, that's actually what we're doing now. But back then we had absolutely no proof. So people said to me, well, this is actually a bit of a transactional platform because you're trying to get people to buy more equity in their shared ownership home. So are you willing to entertain it on a no win, no fee basis? If you can get more transactions, then, you'll get paid. I was like, well, if you're willing to pay me, sure, fine, let's do it that way. We did it that way. We then created a massive boost for the first customers that we used this with, and they weren't so happy because the 1.5% on the equity sold could end up being hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So then they went back to like, it would actually be nice to pay you a SaaS fee each month because that's a much smaller amount. And so we kind of went roundabout, and like part of it was the problem of we weren't tested, and therefore people wanted to have a no win, no fee. But then we thought that no win, no fee, could then be a big scalable solution because there was a lot of money. But then we stopped selling because people saw that it would cost quite a lot. And we were a bit confused because we thought this is what you guys wanted. And then we started switching back to SaaS. And said, you're going to get this massive uplift, but it's only going to cost you X, and you can quantify X upfront for the year. And luckily, as soon as we started doing that, now we've got 7 new customers joining next month, and it's starting to get quite a lot of momentum.
Got you. So you've landed on the SaaS model then now as the way forward. But you can also show, you can actually start to show the benefits to your customers and go, look, this is proof or examples of how you will hopefully make a good amount of money out of it. Cool. And then talking a bit about your target market in 2025, who are the customers you're talking to on both sides of Stairpay and any partners? Who are the stakeholders you're engaging with at the moment?
So I see Stairpay as a B2B2C solution. So our first product is all to do with shared ownership. In the long term, our goal is to become a marketplace that connects first-time buyers to any alternative buying scheme. So it's not necessarily connecting them to a property, it's connecting them to a scheme. So the first scheme that we're working on is shared ownership, but there's also other schemes out there like rent to buy. There was recently an equity loan launched by Generation Home. But there's lots of other schemes out there. The problem is that lots of them are very small still. And the lack of visibility means that they just, less money flows into it. So we see our job as connecting the people who want to be homeowners to the institutions that run these schemes. Day one, our clients are going to be housing associations because they're currently doing about 80% of shared ownership sales. And then the other 20% is currently done by real estate funds who've set up registered providers who do shared ownership. And these are a mixture of private equity funds, pension funds, asset managers, and then there's some private equity pools. Essentially. So our clients are the housing associations and what are called for-profit registered providers, who are these funds. We see them as our clients. The customers or the users are also the aspiring first-time buyers and the shared owners, but the people who pay us are the B2B.
I see. And is that model now in 2025 really the same as the vision you had for the model in 2022? Obviously there's been a lot of evolutions in the last 3 years you just described, but was that sort of model the same 3 years ago, or have you evolved that at all?
There's obviously lots that I've learned since. I always knew that this is what we wanted to do. I never wanted to be a property fund. I never wanted to have any exposure to real estate. I wanted to build a tech solution, pure tech,
Yeah.
that could. My goal was always quite simple from an outcome. It was to increase the supply of affordable homes.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that by me raising loads of capital, even if I raised $1 billion, that's only going to buy you however many thousands of home, and there's 200,000 people who need homes every year. So I just thought, as a tech business, I'm never the one who I can't be the one who's trying to raise all the money. I should let the institutions like Blackstone, M&G, Legal & General, who already have billions, I should find a way for them to park their money into first-time buyers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned that a lot of the schemes, they're not well known for the first-time buyers. I mean, why do you think that is? Is it, any ideas on, there's a lot of good stuff out there. Is it has not been marketed well? Is the products have not been developed properly? Why do you think there's been a blocker for first-time buyers to access those schemes historically?
I think it's definitely a marketing problem. There's a liquidity problem. There's not enough supply on a lot of these schemes, which means that there's no point them doing lots of marketing, because a lot of these smaller schemes only have 100 properties to sell a year, and they can sell those so easily because there's hundreds of thousands of people who are struggling to buy. But a good example is the Help to Buy scheme. Everyone's heard of it. I think you'd struggle to find, and the people might not necessarily understand exactly how it works if they didn't look into it, but everyone's heard of it. Shared ownership, most people, I didn't know what it was 3 years ago. Now I'd probably say I'm one of the leading experts in the UK. But most of my friends haven't heard of shared ownership. People think it's some sort of social housing scheme where it's either social housing, or they think it's that Picasso style, you buy a holiday home combined with 3 or 4 people, and that's what they think shared ownership is. But it's got nothing to do with that. So it's definitely a marketing problem.
Yeah, and it's shared ownership. Obviously, a large percentage of that is run by the housing associations, as you mentioned. But is it was it initially a government scheme, or was it owned by each individual housing association in terms of the sort of foundational structure?
So I'll answer the Help to Buy bit first. So Help to Buy was essentially a way, it's an equity loan. So you could buy, if you could get a mortgage on 85% of your house, you could borrow an additional 15%, and the government would basically back that loan. So Homes England actually owns all of those loans. So that is actually government owned. Shared ownership is different. The way shared ownership is funded is the housing association will build the home, or the house builder will build the home and sell it to the housing association. And then the housing association will sell a share to, Ollie, who can only afford to buy 50%. And the way that the government is involved is they grant fund each home. So if you're selling a shared ownership home, say it's worth 500K, the government will put, it depends on where it is basically, but it's between 5 and 20K that will go back to the housing association as grant funding to sort of support it. But so they are involved in it, but they don't really own the homes. Yeah,
I see. That's interesting. Cool. And then I guess you've described Stairpay as a glue that brings, and as you've just outlined, bringing the sort of the buyers and the housing, the sellers, the housing associations in many cases together. Have there been any, I guess from a technical perspective, first of all, any challenges with that? Because you've got different parties on the buyer side. They want to have a very good, seamless, frictionless, ideally UX into the platform. And then on the buy side, you've got multiple stakeholders. Property, real estate is a complex environment with so much going on in terms of a house purchase, as you've mentioned before. Have there been any technical challenges, particularly on that latter side, I guess, of actually setting up the platform and getting everything built in?
There's technical challenges everywhere. There's on the B2B side and B2C side, they're very separate technical challenges. They're both quite big. On the B2C side, which was where we started, for example, we built a whole platform for lawyers to do their conveyancing via Stairpay. And we thought if we can automate a lot of those tasks and the resident can see exactly where they are in the conveyancing process, everyone's going to be happy. Well, that requires a lawyer actually going in and filling in some information, which if they don't, then the tech actually makes everything worse. So we ended up having to scrap that whole thing, even though, you know, there's probably 100 startups out there trying to automate conveyancing. And I think it's such a difficult task. But we just scrapped that bit because we thought actually it wasn't going to add much value to what we wanted to do. So that's a B2C problem that we found. You know, and you've got more problems in the fact that if you're thinking of buying a house, you need to speak to a mortgage broker, then you speak to a bank, you speak to a conveyancer, you speak to a surveyor, you speak to all of these people, and you know, none of them are talking to each other. And you know, it's really difficult to fix that issue. So the way that we want to try and, you know, put them all in one room, because they have no incentive to be in one room unless you create one. So the way that we want to create that is if we can control the B2B side and all of the supply comes through us, then you have to play ball. Otherwise, you're going to be left out. And playing ball means that you join the platform, you use the platform, and you get credit. You get like a star rating. So if you're a crap mortgage broker who just constantly lets people down, you're just going to get to the bottom of the funnel. That's where we're like trying to get to. But I think first you need to try and solve the B2B side. How do we control the supply side? And then you've got loads of other issues, which I think we've spoken about before, which is that every landlord or big landlord, institutional landlord, not, you know, mum and dad landlord, will have a property management system. They'll have an accounting system. They'll have some sort of CRM. Most of the time, these aren't talking to each other. Some of them, not very many, have some sort of resident portal. If they do, that tends to be something that's off the shelf that doesn't talk to anything else and doesn't show them any data. So our job is to kind of try and, you know, we don't want to go in and say we're a CRM because there's no point. Like Salesforce is always going to be a better CRM than us. And like, that's just what we're going to do. So we need to try and say, okay, what does Salesforce not do? They're definitely not a real estate business. They don't understand real estate transactions, nor do they care. We just need to build something that actually can connect to Salesforce and does the real estate part that, you know, Salesforce is never going to do. So that's kind of how we become a glue, but it's quite bespoke for each client, that bit.
Does that mean you're having to build the APIs or the middleware or whatever it is that actually connects Stairpay into those, or is that on the responsibility that you're asking the client to do that?
Oh no, we have to do that.
I assume that was the case.
We have to do that. So some of it we built ourselves. Some of it you can use third-party middleware providers to try and do the integrations. It kind of depends how quickly you need to go, how much budget there is. We always try and charge the client back because otherwise it's going to cost a fortune. And integrations are always one where everyone wants them. But then if you say, okay, it's going to cost you X and everyone can deal without them, which is good and bad. It's good because it allows you to move forward. It's bad because you're just creating a problem for 12 months down the line. But, you know, as a tech business, we also want to get started quickly. So we are happy to start, but then we probably become one of the problems in terms of if we don't talk to Salesforce and whatever else you're using, then it's going to create a problem down the line. So it's within the reason why we're incentivized to build those integrations is that we see ourselves as a data solution and we want to show you all of the data on your residence. And if we're not talking to whatever system holds the data on the properties, then you can match those two and you don't know what's going on.
Got you. Back on the B2C side, you mentioned the sort of lawyers and the conveyancing aspect, which you trialed and decided wasn't right for you guys. Do you also have a platform where your first time buyer would actually want to log into Stairpay and actually look at, you know, have a good user experience of what the options are for gradual ownership and then the sort of staircase ownership? Is it actually built for your typical person on the street who actually wants to buy something to use as well? Is it set up from that perspective?
Not to date, but we're actually about to launch our first pilot to do that with, cool. Which is really exciting. We can't say who it is. But our goal is to get to that as quickly as possible. But again, if you don't have the B2B momentum, you're going to set up a marketplace which has no supply, and therefore what's the point in paying for marketing and get lots of eyeballs if they can't buy anything? So you need the B2B partner to sort of do that with.
Makes sense. you took some VC funding, I think, for Stairpay. Is that right? I mean, does that place any additional pressure on you as a business owner in terms of how you have to operate, or is it actually just quite helpful in terms of it gives you some money and a runway to do things? What the pros and cons you found, if you can share that?
We were laughing about this the other day with the team. I think we raised quite a lot for a pre-seed when the team was very, very small. It was 750K, which is 2 years ago. That was a very big pre-seed, especially for a solo founder. At the time, it was just me. So I suddenly had if I didn't hire anyone, I'd have 10 years runway, if not more. So it suddenly felt quite nice. And then, you hire a few people and it chops away quite quickly. I always thought that it would be, the journey from 0 to 1 is so different in every startup. Quite often you only hear about when a startup's already at 1 and then they get to 2 and they're like, overnight success and all this stuff. The 0 to 1 is where you're building it, you're trialing things, you're trying to find product market fit. And I always thought that in the real estate sector, that would take us 2 years at least. And therefore I kept the team to, we've never been more than, now there's 6 of us. But it was never more than 4 for the first 2.5 years, because I just thought we need as much time as possible. We were joking about the other day is that actually, as soon as our runway was getting a bit shorter, that's when all the sales started coming in, because there was more pressure on us. To be honest, the VCs don't put as much pressure on me as I put on myself. And I think, none of them picked up the phone when runway was, less than 12 months. I just suddenly looked at the mirror and I was like, we gotta make, now we gotta do it. And, luckily, we're close to profitability and we don't have to worry about that so much anymore. And now, if we do go out and fundraise again, it'll be purely for growth. It's not for survival, which I always said I wanted to try and avoid. But to answer your question, no. But maybe it's just I got lucky with the ones that invested in us.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Going back to sort of housing associations, obviously a big part of the picture for you as your clients. They're non-profit. They're often quite stretched financially. They're looking to reduce tech stacks, in my experience, and consolidate rather than expand. Sometimes is that created a challenge, because they are roughly 80% of your customer base? Is it tough to persuade the housing associations of the benefits of you bringing in another tech platform in?
Absolutely. But I mean, you should expect that as a founder, that it's going to be tough to convince anyone to part ways with that money. The good thing about housing associations is that they have very recurring and predictable revenue, because all their revenue is basically rental. So they know how much money they've got. Every year in April, they'll create the budget for the next 12 months. And you just need to try and fit within that and try and say, okay, if you've got, 10K, 20K or whatever it is set aside for this one particular vertical, can I have that? And I will turn it into X. And the first pilot we did, we generated close to £3 million for our housing associations within 2 months. So then after that, it was quite easy to go back. And then when I said that's, sales receipts. So if you're looking at, how much money they actually make, it's probably 15-20% of that. But still, that's quite a lot of money. It's nowhere near what they paid us. So, as soon as you do that, then it's quite different, because it's like, has anyone got 10 grand to turn into $1 million? Well, suddenly everyone's got 10 grand. It doesn't mean that they trust that what worked for one is going to work for them. So it's still a bit of a journey to explain it to them. But I think we're quite lucky in a way that it's not I'm selling you cost reductions or I'm selling you time savings, which sometimes are a little bit harder. Well, cost reductions, I guess, are easy, but time saving is quite hard to quantify how much that should cost. Our first product was staircasing, and staircasing, the reason why I thought was a good way in is that there is no way that by automating it and making the customer journey much slicker and using data that I won't generate an uplift for you. And if you believe that and understand that, then it's a no-brainer to go and pay for it. Because, the ROI is 20x in month 1. So
makes sense. Yeah. Is it the same when you talk to the private, roughly 20% of your customers? Is it really the same types of conversations you have with them, or do they come at it from they're obviously for profit? Do they have a different angle, or is it actually you're still fundamentally having the same conversation about Stairpay will solve this problem for you and I'll make you some money?
Every client is slightly different. There's if you talk to pension funds, they don't necessarily want big capital receipts coming in, because they've got long dated liabilities and they want to be able to match those. So if suddenly say they've got 100 shared ownership properties and they think they're going to make £100,000 in rent a year from these for 35 years, as making up the numbers here. If suddenly you get half of them to staircase, they're like I've got to pay someone's pension back in 35 years. And now I can't do that because I've got to replace this. So they don't necessarily want us to go in and try and, do loads of stuff. It's more that they want to be able to forecast it. And, I think staircasing is something that's been left alone for so long that it's actually quite hard for me to know whether when we go in and we generate this extra staircasing, is that just a level of staircasing that should be happening but isn't because no one's doing any marketing around staircasing, or are we just making people staircase who wouldn't have done otherwise? It's quite hard to know that.
I mean, it feels like it's the right thing for the consumer, doesn't it, to staircase based on the cost of rent. It feels generally it's the right thing for if someone can gradually own their own home quicker, then they should do it. Is that true?
It depends on it's not always true. Well, it depends on what your views are, because in shared ownership you typically, the average is 40% of the first share that you buy. The rent that you pay on the unowned equity starts at 2.75% rental yield, which is actually really low. Compared to somewhere else in London, you pay 4.5%, 5%. So actually, your rent that you're paying is really low. The mortgage will be, the same as any other mortgage, probably a little bit more expensive. So actually, for everyone right now, if they staircase, they're going to pay more each month than they would have done if they didn't staircase. However, you've got the flip side of, well, you now own more equity, you don't pay rent, all the amount that you're paying is going towards your mortgage, which is your retirement, and you're building equity in the home. So the only reason why I say it depends is that there are some people where actually, waiting 6 months and waiting for interest rates to come down might be a better idea, but we can't predict that, right? We always get financial advice. We don't give financial advice.
Fair enough. And what, in terms of sort of trends around gradual ownership, I mean, it'd be interested to know whether is it more flats versus houses, or in terms of housing type, private ownership, affordable, social. What are the sort of general? Is it quite diverse, or are there certain themes that you see in terms of it's more this type of property where gradual ownership is more prevalent?
It's very much a London versus the rest of the country. In London, they're mostly flats. Everywhere else, it's mostly houses. There are still flats outside of London. I think I'd be really careful buying a flat in shared ownership, because you've got your service charge, which is quite unpredictable. I know I've spoken to lots of shared owners whose service charge was fairly flat. It went up, in a way that they predicted, and therefore it was completely fine. And they managed to buy a flat in zone 1 or zone 2 in London, where if it wasn't for shared ownership, they would have ended up in the counties somewhere. Commuting in and spending all that money on your train. So it's better to spend it on the train or on the service charge. It's I think it's naive to say that flats are bad, because they fulfill a purpose, and sometimes you don't have another option in London. In terms of can you repeat? I guess, what do you mean by like private versus affordable versus social?
I guess it was the sort of split of gradual ownership in terms of housing type. Is it reflective really of that 80-20 split you outlined earlier, in terms of, typically 80% of gradual ownership is in affordable and social housing rather than private?
All shared ownership counts as low cost home ownership. So technically all counts as affordable housing.
I see.
I think affordable in the UK, everyone thinks it sounds like social housing. It's got nothing to do with social housing. Yes, the landlords might be similar. In fact, they're the same for a lot of it, but housing associations have a social portfolio and they have a shared ownership portfolio, and they have sometimes even, private sale portfolios because they're building houses, and they are three separate things. I
see. So Stairpay is really, it's all of affordable housing. Is that right, in terms of where
it is today? I think in the actually not too distant future, depending on how that pilot comes along, we'll have the ability to turn a build to rent portfolio into affordable housing or low cost ownership. So we can get, as a institutional landlord, you can start with build to rent, and then via our technology, you can give your residents the option to convert their rental property into a, say, shared ownership property or rental property, or whatever it is. So you're giving basically someone a try before you buy. Buy a rent. Which I think is the future, because it just makes total sense. People come out of uni, they have to rent for a few years. Like, there's no really way around it. And then once they've rented for a bit, why not give them the option to purchase that home? As a landlord, it makes sense for you, because then that person's not, they're going to be in that house for 10, 15 years rather than the average, which is like 14 months for people who rent. You constantly have to find a new tenant.
So it's actually, there's benefits for the owner as well from that point of view. And in terms of like what's happening, right at the moment, just in, I was reading your post about Gen H and Persimmon Homes, the new build boost. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, and how does that relate to Stairpay?
Gen H, who I think formerly known as Generation Home, their goal is to turn renters into buyers. A lot of the products that they have historically had were around boosters. So if mum and dad had enough money, they could act as a booster to your either deposit or mortgage, which means that you can put down a bigger deposit or get a bigger mortgage from the bank. They've recently, I think, this week, launched is very much a replica of the Help to Buy scheme, in the sense that it's an equity loan. They will do both the mortgage and the equity loan, so they'll lend you, I think it's up to 85%, and then they give you up to 15% booster. You have to have a 5% deposit. And it's structured it pretty much the same way as the Help to Buy scheme. So for the first 5 years, it's interest free. The equity booster is interest free. Now, if you manage to staircase to 100%, i.e., get a mortgage on 100% within that 5 years, sounds brilliant. If not, I think it could get quite complicated. But it's no different to the Help to Buy scheme. That was the same problem then. I think there's a massive problem that needs to be fixed. With all the people who are now out of the 5-year interest-free with the Help to Buy scheme, who suddenly have to pay interest and never thought about it.
Particularly with the rates where they are now, making it even harder. So this is another version of that in a way, which might have the same problems down the line in 5 years.
I think most gradual ownership schemes have this problem. But I think that, like, if that going into it, I still think that they're great. Because it's the same with shared ownership. Your rent goes up every year. Your mortgage is obviously going to change, might go up or down. And your service charge, if you're in a flat, is going to go up. So if within 10 years you manage to staircase to 100%, then great. Like, you built up some equity, your rent was actually subsidized, and you've done something good. If you stay there for 30 years and your rent keeps going up, and your salary stays exactly the same, so you can never staircase. If going into it you thought that you would be able to get to 100%, then I think you probably chose the wrong product, or someone sold you the wrong product. If you knew it, the flip side is if you accepted that all you were ever going to be able to own is 50%, and that was great for you because it's better than owning 0% and renting forever, then again, shared ownership is great for that. With these equity boosts, it's slightly different because it's a bit of a ticking time bomb. At 5 years, the cost will definitely go up significantly.
It's a big,
which you don't really have in shared ownership. There's not like it gets to 5 years and then the cost goes up like that. It's a lot more gradual, and you've got, you can always sell your shared ownership home or sell your share. In this, I think if the value of your property goes down and you sell within the first 5 years, I think you actually still have to pay back the loan on the loan amount rather than the value of the equity, which is not what the Help to Buy scheme used to do. But if it goes up, then Gen H gets the upside.
That seems a little unfair. That's the one way.
Yeah, I guess so. But that's why you always have to read the T's and C's. But that's why I think, if you know that, and you know that your salary is going to, go up by 20% or whatever in the next 5 years, then there's basically very little risk, and therefore do it. But if someone just gets told, oh, you know what, you could own a home this way, and they don't think about the fact that their salary, it all comes down to, is your salary going to change significantly between now and 5 years time? If not, then don't go near this. If yes, then
worth
go for it.
Yeah. Cool. And then last couple of questions, I guess. So, like, in terms of, you've obviously developed a lot in the last 3 years and making some good progress by the sound of things of what you just outlined, particularly in the last 6 to 12 months, and with the you mentioned the sort of high street bank as well, which sounds very interesting as a new development. In terms of like future goals for Stairpay, you've talked a bit about, property management beyond staircasing. Where could you see the business going in the next, 12 or 36 months?
Yeah. So we already do more than staircasing, but I think it's easier to think of the features that you give the B2C residents, because on the B2B side, unless you do that job, it probably means nothing to you. But like our first product, the B2C product, was giving someone an app, a shared ownership app. And all that app allowed you to do was to see, okay, how much is my property worth? Can I afford to buy more? If so, what's the next step? And that was basically our basic MVP. To that, we've now started adding things like, can I use AI to answer questions that I would otherwise ask my landlord, which is, early stages of property management stuff. For the landlords who want us to, we can connect in their repair system and someone can see it via Stairpay. Someone has asked us to show the rent account. So can you log into Stairpay and see what your direct debit is for your rent? So it is already turning into a bit of a property management app. Once that's done, it'll be done for shared ownership first. But to be honest, there's no different using it for any other property scheme, because everyone's got this, like you're living in a property, right? It's the same thing. The only bit that you need to change is like goal page, which is like, what are your goals in the next year? They're like, we have a whole section for that. And if you're in shared ownership, that's going to look completely different to if you're on rent to buy. But they're like, manage my property section looks exactly the same for everyone. So once the property management bit is done, we then will focus on the first time buyer app. And, as a first time buyer, you can go in, you can see all the different schemes that are available to you, which ones you can and can't afford. And then we'll have to take you on that journey of picking a scheme, which then will mean picking a provider. And that provider will, give you access to whatever homes. Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, it sounds like it's a real opportunity for people who are struggling to get onto the housing ladder without the support of mum and dad or large salaries or savings, whatever it is, to actually make their way step by step, literally, excuse the pun, but onto the housing ladder. And it feels like a very, obviously it's commercially viable, but I think it feels like a really positive thing to help people out as well, which must feel, hopefully that feels good from your perspective, to actually feel like you're making a positive difference to people who need some help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the saddest thing when a business starts growing is that you lose contact with the customers that you built this whole for in the first place. And I think I still, someone called up the other day. It was actually a VC that booked a call with us via our website. And they were like, I was so shocked because they booked a resident consultation. They're like, why is the founder taking these? And I was like, well, I need to be speaking to our potential customers to understand what we need to build. But obviously I don't have as much time as I used to take a lot of these calls. But when I take them, it's always quite nice because either someone comes up with something I hadn't thought of, or, you know, they call up and they're like, oh, this actually, you know, made my life a bit easier, or it resulted in this, or, you know, we now are rent free forever. And it wasn't obviously all thanks to us. Like, they signed up to shared ownership with a landlord who built the house for 3 years. So like the landlord, I think, you know, they never get much credit, but like they're the ones that put them in a position to own their home. We just facilitate it. We, you know, nudged them a little bit. That's our job. So we can't take too much credit.
No, part of that chain though. So
exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Floris, for taking the time to talk. Really appreciate it. It was really, really enjoyable chat. I look forward to sharing that with our listeners. And thanks again. And we'll catch up again soon, I hope. Cool.